This is the disclaimer for Wildlife Control Consultant and Pest Geek Podcast for the Living the Wildlife podcast. Always follow national, state, provincial, and local laws when using pesticides and or other control methods to manage pests. Wildlife Control Consultant, LLC, Pest Geek Podcast, Living the Wildlife Podcast, Stephen M. Vantassel, or their or his affiliates are not responsible for followers' use of the information provided here. Hi, everyone. Stephen Vantassel, Wildlife Control Consultant, bringing you another episode of Living the Wildlife Podcast as part of the Pest Geek Podcast family. So, hey, hope you subscribe. We're glad you're here today, and we have a special guest. His name is Kyle Waltz. He is the owner and CEO of Conserv LLC. That's Conserv, I guess with no E. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's
We
correct.
tried
All
to
right.
throw a little modern day spin on it.
That's it. All right. Conserv out of LLC, and it's based out of Birmingham, Alabama, and he is our guest today. So we're hoping that we're gonna have a great informational conversation about the growth of his business. I guess he has a franchise or something similar to that, and he'll tell more about it and what his vision of the industry is, and we'll glean some insights from his business experience. So we're really glad to have you on board, and welcome, Kyle. Welcome to the Pest Geek Podcast.
Thanks, Stephen. Really appreciate you inviting me on here.
Well, thanks for coming on. So why don't you tell the audience a little bit about your background, what got you into wildlife control, and then third, describe your business and what you're doing.
Sure. So I'm a hunter and trapper first, businessman second. So found a love for the great outdoors. As long as I can remember, I was out chasing something. Son of a fishing captain. My dad's been a fishing charter captain for about 25 years. Okay. So just grew up in the outdoors doing something, hunting, fishing, surfing, trapping, whatever. And about 14 years old, I met somebody who had a job title called a wildlife manager. And I knew the day that I met him that I was going to work with wildlife the rest of my life. I found out that you could actually make money working with wildlife. So I made that decision right then. And I've never changed my mind once.
Wow.
There's no way I could do anything else. I just love wildlife so much. I love wildlife conservation, which is why I went with the name Conserv on this business. Okay. I think it's super important, but I also believe that hunting and trapping is important. So kind of fell into the industry and had multiple jobs across wildlife management. The first being is the assistant to a caretaker of a 40,000 acre private land in Fargo, Georgia, which is a very small town of about 200 people in Fargo, middle of nowhere. That's one of the largest continuous acres of swampland in the southeast, right next to Okefenokee National Forest.
Oh my goodness.
So I moved there the day after I turned 18. I graduated on my 18th birthday, moved there the next day, had a job lined up with this timber company called Superior Pines Products, and started working with them, making a fat $6 an hour. So I was killing it at 18 years old. I actually decreased my pay from a busboy to an assistant. And I worked with a guy named Junebug. You can imagine what he was like.
Oh,
he was
my
as
goodness.
country as collard greens.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I learned a lot. It was a very interesting job. Spent most of our time out in the woods, in the middle of nowhere, trapping animals, trapping mostly hogs, nuisance hogs that were out there on the property. We did some predator control for coyotes and whatnot. And then we did a lot of deer management and turkey management and things like that, prescribed burning and things like that.
So on that particular property, you were managing the landscape for timber production. Was that the goal?
Well, yeah, timber production was, but probably hunting more than anything.
Hunting as well. Okay.
Yeah, probably hunting more than anything. He had catfish ponds. He had various food plots all over the property. If you're familiar with deer hunting, you know what that is.
Okay.
It's 40,000 acres, so it's a big piece of land.
Because I didn't hear anything about trapping beaver, which kind of when you talked about the pines thing, typically timber companies are trying to get the beavers at least managed so that they don't drown their trees. And so I didn't hear that. Did you do any beaver trapping, or that just wasn't because you wanted the water for waterfowl, or the beavers weren't an issue there?
We didn't have a lot of beaver issues. I
Okay.
think that they did an extraordinary job. That property actually bumped up against the Okefenokee National Forest.
Yeah.
And they did a really good job in planting those pines and facing those pine lanes in the correct directions. And they had dug lots of canals throughout that property. So they were drained really well, surprisingly,
Okay.
in a
Okay.
lot of spots. And the spots that were too wet historically, it was just wetlands. There was no
Right.
ponds there.
Right.
So there wasn't too much concern for beavers.
And so you made the you who did you in what introduced you to wildlife control? So you were into more of a wildlife
Yeah.
management for habitat conservation for production of game animals. It sounded like so you made the switch from land manager to now you're in wildlife control. What
Yeah.
made that jump for you?
Well, I ended up losing the job there. Being such a small town, this is kind of a silly reason, but the house I was living in, they were going to pick it up and put it in the back of a semi truck and
Right.
move it to another property. And I had to be out of the house and making $6 an hour. I didn't have anywhere else to go.
Right.
And my rent was $100 a month. So
Wow. Wow.
So I had no choice. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida. So I had no choice but to move back to Jacksonville. I couldn't afford to go back and forth. So I ended up landing a job with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. And I was what's considered an OPS park ranger. I did that for about 2.5 years. Actually got fired from that job, probably because I'm a little bit rebellious.
Okay.
And and then I ended up getting into the urban wildlife control. Right before I got into nuisance wildlife control, I worked at a golf course,
Okay.
one of those high-end, fancy, gated golf course communities in Florida, in Ponte Vedra. And I started seeing wildlife solutions, critter control, and all these different wildlife control trucks coming in and servicing all these wealthy people. And I'd never even seen that in my entire life growing up there.
Wow.
So I started applying. I started
Yeah.
applying at all these places and finally landed a job at a startup in a business called Rascal Rangers. They're no longer in business today.
Okay.
Um,
'Cause I think
and
I've
I
heard of
worked
them.
there for a couple of years. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now you're out on your own, and you've been on your
Mhm.
own. You're for how many years now?
11 years.
11
Exactly.
years.
March, this past March makes 11 years.
Wow, congratulations. So talk about
Thank
that
you.
evolution in terms of talk about the evolution of your company.
Yeah, man, we've had so many changes over the years. So the first company I started was called First Coast Wildlife Services. Started that in 2010 in
Mhm.
Jacksonville. We were very small. It was just me. 2012, I hired my first couple of employees and grew that pretty well up until 2016, just locally. Then I started opening up other locations in 2017 in Florida and all over the country. Some of them worked out really, really well. Some of them were just way too difficult.
Mhm.
But we grew really, really fast in a very short amount of time. In 2017, we did 10 locations in 10 months, all corporately owned, all
Oh my
bootstrapped.
goodness.
Yep.
Wow. How did you find the labor? Because labor is one of the biggest complaints I hear from people
Yeah.
is finding quality people that you can hand the keys to a
Yeah.
truck to.
A very wise mentor once told me, this was in 2014, so well before I had opened up all this. He said, if you can't hire great talent, hire someone. Because if you want to grow, you just have to hire somebody.
Okay.
So sometimes you just hire somebody that might not be perfect for the position and train them and just hope for the best. And that
right.
really is a common thing in most skilled labor. When you look at plumbing and you look at electricians, HVAC, finding a lot of quality people is hard. Finding a few quality people is good. So I focused more so on hiring unbelievable managers and wasn't ever too concerned about the technicians. Because we always felt like with quality control and you follow the right processes and systems. I mean, look at McDonald's, look at
Right.
Chick-fil-A, look at all these places. They're not paying buku amounts of money for you to work there. It's all about processes and systems to ensure that the quality control is there. So we've tweaked that over the years, and now I would say that it's better than it's ever been as far as our quality goes. But that's we didn't do anything outside of the box as far as finding people. We used Indeed and all those different job apps, and that's how we still hire people today and don't have
That's
too much of a challenge.
that's amazing. So your focus is on the finding the manager. Uh, that's your energy is really placed there, where most of the people I talk to are trying to find this sort of golden child worker that's just sort of like I call them like the messiah complex. And
Yeah,
I tell people, I said, look, I'd like to hire Jesus myself at minimum wage, but he's just not available right now.
no,
And so I mean, that's pretty sacrilegious. I have a theological background. I'm not looking to offend
yeah,
anybody. It's just,
no,
but
no,
it's sometimes I hear people, what they're looking for is they want basically a themselves duplicated, but yet someone who's obedient.
yeah,
So
not gonna
is that,
happen. You
yeah,
know,
so your approach is really different, and you've had success with that. So I'm just odd. I'm amazed
well,
by that.
it's not that, I mean, we've definitely had turnover.
No,
There's
no,
no
no,
doubt
without a
we have
doubt. No, I
lots
get
of
that. Yeah,
turnover. I think for us, we're always hiring, even when we're not. So like,
right.
if we're fully staffed, we still have ads going. We're still looking. We're still talking to people. We might still even be doing interviews. We're keeping that pipeline open. I would say that our average employee that's not a manager, they're in their early 20s,
Right.
21,
Yeah.
22, 23. And to no fault of their own, a lot of these guys, might want to make more money one day. They might want to make more than $40,000 a year. So for us, if you want to make more than $40,000 a year, you either have to step up or go somewhere else. So you either have to be a manager or a salesperson, or go out and start your own branch, or go work for somebody else.
Gotcha.
So if you don't want that responsibility, then it's just not going to be for you. And we've had a lot of guys over the years work with us and then eventually go start their own business, or go work at another company that's willing to pay them more. But
You don't sound bitter.
no,
You're not bitter. I mean, that's so I'm really intrigued by this. So you're not bitter about it. Usually they're like, oh, I don't want to train people. They're just going to go compete with me, and so
no. Look,
you know,
I'm training a few people, but my managers are training people. So I look at my business from afar. I live in South
yeah,
Florida. Our main business is in Birmingham. I'm nowhere
right,
near there.
right,
I might only see that team once a quarter. Most of my guys I might only see a couple times a year.
okay.
So I looked at it more so as this is an asset. This is an investment. It took me years to figure that out.
Right.
But I need to find good managers that want to run the business as their own, and they're the ones there that are probably a little bit more bitter than me, and
Sure. Yeah.
they're dealing with those headaches, because I used to
Yeah.
have to do it myself too, and I
Right.
know that's really
Right.
really hard.
Yeah.
Uh, so
So can you describe the process? How did you go through that growth period? Because clearly the handoff from yourself managing everything to now you're giving that authority over to a manager. There's changes. Like your first one is you're hiring your first person. That's a major change. You obviously got
yeah,
that pretty quick. But then the next hurdle is how do you give up now you're giving authority to a manager, and now you've given up even more control. How did you
yeah.
transition that?
So I think before we get into that, I think it's important that people know that not you can't be good at everything, right? So
Right.
I know I'm not the best manager because I want to get stuff done really, really fast.
Yeah.
I think that my way is the best way. I'm not very patient. Although some of my guys that do work with me closer, they might say that.
Right.
But in my head, I might be freaking out. And up front, I'm trying to just like breathe. Do not yell at them. Do not scream at them.
Right. Right.
So I'm good at sales. So I try to focus on sales related activities, and I'm good at growing the top numbers of our company. So I think that as an owner, you have to identify what is it that I'm really good at and what is it that I'm not good at. I'm actually not the best technician.
Okay.
I'm not the best exclusion guy. I
Right.
don't like getting up on steep roofs. So I have to find people and surround myself with people that are good at those things. And so I focus on what I'm good at, and I let them focus on what they want to do and what they're good at. So that's
Hmm.
the key, is just finding the people that are good at those things and that like doing those things. And then you as the owner might not be the best manager, you might not be the best technician, you might not be the best salesperson, and you got to hire people that do those things.
Yeah. So when you're giving your workers, let's talk about your workers a little bit. When they get that $40,000 a year, does that include any benefits, or is there health? Is there any retirement kicker in there? Anything like
Yeah,
that?
so
Or
no, we don't offer any health insurance. We probably will eventually. We don't offer any health insurance. We do give people, as much time off as they need if they ask for days off. It's very rare that we say no
okay,
to days off. But your main holidays you're off. We try to be flexible with that. We understand. Like I got a guy right now that just had his second kid, and so we gave him the week off for maternity leave. And there's obviously situations like that. So we try to give them that opportunity. And the guys that are not just technicians, that are more in sales, so we isolate positions. You can either be a technician, a
right,
salesperson, or a manager. You basically have those
gotcha.
three roles. And there's variances of being a technician. If you're a salesperson, you could easily make six figures a year working for us. So no, we don't
Wow.
give you health insurance, but you're
Right.
making six figures.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and same thing as a manager. So those technicians that want to make more money, they can make more money through production. If they're able to produce, they're going to get bonuses based off of their production. The more work they can get done, as long as it's quality work and customers are
Right.
happy, they're able to get an extra little kickback for that. So you can make more than 40,000 or
Yeah.
50,000 as a tech if you're able to work quickly and maybe put in a little bit of overtime.
Gotcha. Now, you do any pest control, any traditional pest control, or are you strictly wildlife?
Yeah, we do. We actually just started doing pest control in
Okay.
Birmingham. I used to do a lot more pest control throughout Florida. I sold that portion of my business beginning of last year, and another portion of the business as well, just to take some chips off the table and kind of restructure things and
Mm,
design it a little bit more around my lifestyle. Um, but yeah, I think pest control is super important for us. There's an amazing cross-selling opportunity in
yeah.
our industry there. So if you're in wildlife control, I tell everybody you should be in pest control for the
Yeah.
cross-selling opportunity. And if you're in pest control, you should be doing wildlife control for retention purposes, retain those customers, those recurring customers. And obviously, either if you're sending your wildlife work to, or you're not doing wildlife work, you're going to potentially lose that customer because we're the kind of company that'll take advantage of that.
Right. Yeah. So there's been a lot more integration within the industry. I heard one vision of one company is they wanted to be the one call for all
Yeah,
home related services. Now they were a long way from getting there, don't get me wrong, but they were in the process. If you needed repairs, if you needed pest control, if you needed wildlife control, and so the number, it was like one call did it all. That
right.
was their goal. Do you see that occurring in the industry, or is that, I mean, that's a ways
Yeah,
off, obviously, but do you see that coming into the industry?
yeah, I do. I mean, when you say repair, you're talking about wildlife exclusion
Exclusion, but
or
they were
like
looking
handyman.
at even more at, like termite damage, where sometimes the
Oh yeah,
damage can be quite extensive. It's more than just simply patching a hole and making it look pretty. It's, wall removal and
yeah,
going
yeah,
down
yeah.
to the studs and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm familiar. I know that Aero Exterminators does that. I'm very familiar with that company.
Hmm.
A lot of pest control companies do that. They might sub it out rather than
Right.
do it internally. Like I know Terminex and Orkin will subcontract that kind of work. They subcontract a lot of different work
Yeah.
for their customers, so they're able to still pull that revenue through their business. But they don't have to hire and deal with training those people and whatnot.
Yeah.
They're just subbing it out. So I think that's smart. But I think the smart companies out there, they should do everything they can to hold on to that revenue. I mean, why wouldn't you? If there's opportunities there, you should sell it. But I think you should also be careful in getting too far away from your core business model. Like as a person, I can't be good at everything. As a
Right.
company, we can't be perfect at everything.
Right. Right.
And if you're ever thinking about selling your business one day, that can become a problem if you're running all those numbers through the same P&L and through the same entity, because it can get a little bit confusing as to what's what, and it might scare a buyer away and they don't really know what exactly they're getting.
So where's your company going? What are your goals? You have how many offices now, and what are your
Yeah,
goals?
so I wrote stuff down this morning because it's hard for me to always remember it. So right
Sure.
now we have 10 locations.
Okay.
Um, two of those are corporately owned. Five of those are partnerships where we just own equity of other businesses. And then we have three licensees where we don't own any equity. We just license the name Conserv
Okay.
to three different businesses, similar to a franchise, but
Hmm.
it's not a franchise. I don't have any interest in franchising. We've
Okay.
done three acquisitions this year.
Wow.
Like, yeah. So I told you before we did 10 new locations in 2017 in 10 months. There's a lot of advantages to doing an acquisition that we see that is better than going out and starting from scratch in a new location. And one of the reasons that I divested part of the company last year was because I was traveling so much. I had so many locations all over the place. Being based in Florida, I was going up to New Jersey, Chicago, all over the place. And those are all corporately owned. So if we ever had a manager go down or a technician go down and we're shorthanded, somebody has to do it. And if I have one of my other managers somewhere else, well, guess who's going to go? I'm going to go.
You're gonna go.
So I ended up
Nice.
spending more than half the year in hotels. And
Wow.
I just wasn't interested in continuing to do that anymore. So tried to build a business a different way now. And that's why we have partnerships and licensees. We don't have controlling stakes of those businesses. They run their own operation, but we still are able to get the benefits of
Right.
having those locations just like we would if they were corporately owned. And as far as our primary locations right now, it's basically Birmingham and Durham, North Carolina. And we're really just looking to do acquisitions mainly in those areas
Okay.
to grow. We will do them in other areas if they're structured the right way and it's the right opportunity or if they're big enough. Um, but I think there's a ton of opportunity in this industry for consolidation.
I think there is. And so,
Yeah.
what do you look if you're willing to share? What are you looking for? What's a company that you would be interested in? Obviously, uh, you were looking obviously in the Alabama, greater Alabama area, and now you said the North Carolina area. Did I get that right? So those are
Yeah.
the two main
Yeah.
locations you're looking. So, what
Yes.
if you're looking at a company? What makes you want to what makes a company desirable to you? If that person
Well,
was willing to sell.
a lot of different things. So for one, if it's a smaller business, let's say it's a one-man operator, and they might not sell all of the services that we sell. Maybe they don't do installation,
Mhm.
or maybe they don't offer warranty renewals on exclusion work or something of that nature. We see that as a great opportunity because that's an easy add-on. So we can take
Yeah.
their revenue. Let's say they're doing a couple $100,000 a year. We start selling insulation. We can double the size of that business day one. So that's a great opportunity for us because we're basically able to buy at a good price for that seller, knowing that we can get a lot more out of that business over the next 12 months that we own it. So the smaller companies, that's what we look at.
Okay.
Bigger companies, if they're doing, I would say $1 million plus, we would definitely be interested. We want to make sure that they're not undercharging their customers because that's going to be a huge problem.
Yeah.
So we like to see that their pricing is very standard to what the national companies are charging, like Critter Control and TruTech.
Hmm.
I have a huge amount of respect for Rollins and their brands. They do a great job. And so I do pay close attention to what they're charging because it works.
Yeah.
And so the bigger companies, we're looking at correct pricing. If they have some recurring revenue, that's great. If they have some pest control, that's great. But overall, when you buy a local company in Birmingham or North Carolina, where we're looking, for us, it's additional online presence that's already there. And we get the referrals that they were already getting. If they have a good customer base, we get those repeat customers as
Yeah.
well if they have future problems. And we just see a lot of synergies there, a lot of benefits.
Do
So
you, and typically when you purchase a company, do you keep the previous owner on board for a while, or do you just make a clean cut and start over? Do you have a particular philosophy in that regard?
Not really. We're open to all of the above as
Okay.
far as as long as it works.
Right.
So, for instance, if that owner did want to stay on, if he just wanted to take some chips off the table and maybe take some responsibilities off of his plate, whatever that might be, which could be, let's say, managing employees.
Right.
Maybe he just wants to be a sales rep, but he still
Sure.
wants to be an owner, and he doesn't want to deal with everything else that's involved there. We could structure a deal to where he still owns equity. He's still getting a piece of the pie, and we're taking the majority ownership over the business, and help him in those areas that he might struggle in. Um, we've had situations where the owner just wanted to still own a little bit of equity, but didn't want to work anymore. So he wants to go do something else. He wants to go move away, and we own the majority of his business. And now he's getting a check every month because
Right.
he still owns equity in the business, and he's confident that we're going to hopefully grow it.
Sure.
So he's going to continue to make a lot of money over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So it's a great opportunity for him. But there's not, it's really hard to say. There's not any one set thing that
Okay.
we want to do. Anybody who's interested in selling their business anywhere in the country, we'd be happy to talk to them about that and see what that deal might look like. And maybe it's a good fit, maybe it's not, but it's worth a shot.
Well, with that sort of intro, why don't we just take a couple of moments and how would someone get a hold of you if they were interested and wanted
Yeah.
to
So,
discuss that with you?
yeah, the best way is to email us growth at conservmail.com, conservmail.com. And just put your company name in there and what you're interested in doing, a brief summary about your company, and I'll definitely get back to you eventually.
Yeah,
And
give that email again.
yep, growth at conservmail.com.
Growth at conservmail.com.
Yep. And if you actually go to our website, conservewildlifeservices.com, make sure you put services at the end,
Serve.
conservewildlifeservices.com, and you go to grow with us. There's a section on there about acquisitions and kind
Okay.
of what it looks like to partner with us and how we structure our deals.
Yeah, so I'm intrigued because I don't have intimate knowledge in this particular area, but my suspicion is a lot of your franchises typically have a very, I mean, I don't want to be pejorative here, but maybe it's a standardized way of purchasing a business is my impression. It sounds like you offer a lot more options for a potential seller that a franchise would not offer. Does that sound
Oh,
fair?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
There's not a one size fits all approach. And, we're not a monster company. You're able to deal directly with the decision maker, which is me ultimately. And we're able to kind of hopefully build a situation around what you're trying to accomplish. Um, with that being said, we're not a monster company. We're not going to come in and offer you what a large company is going to be able to offer you if you can find one that's interested in buying your business. But with that being said, too, there's not a lot of buyers out there. You don't really have a lot of options. So I think it is good for our industry to have somebody out there who is willing to purchase off your business. A lot of people end up just closing their business. They don't
Yeah.
sell it. Um,
It's one of the weaknesses in our industry, and I think it's the challenge of the lack of consistent recurring revenue from standard clients. I mean, that was certainly the case when I was in business doing wildlife control. And that is, if someone listened to what I said, the likelihood of me seeing them again was almost zero.
yeah,
But I wasn't in pest control at that time, right? So it was
right.
particularly wildlife. The only the differences would be maybe a grubbing skunk or a moles, maybe beaver. Those would be some different, but those are different animals. But when it came to squirrels getting into buildings or raccoon, you cap the chimney, and that
Yeah,
that chimney's never going to have another raccoon again for
right.
probably until the stainless steel goes away, which is a long time.
Exactly.
And so this is the idea of recurring revenue and how do you value that business is very difficult because with
Yeah.
pest control, you have a consistent monthly, how many monthly accounts do you have? How many quarterly accounts do you have? And that's unless you screw it up completely, you can foresee that revenue going on for a pretty long time, maybe a couple of years. Well, with wildlife control, we had rabies hit in my area, and I
Yeah.
lost a third of my business because raccoons disappeared.
Right. Yeah, you're exactly right. So
You know?
one-time service businesses, traditionally, you're going to be able to sell it for 1 to maybe 5 times your
Yeah.
profit. And if you're a one-man operator, and let's say it's a new territory for us, we don't have any current operations there, it's very unlikely that we're going to be interested, just because we have to basically hire a whole team to
Yeah.
run your business. We don't want to have one guy running the business. We would like to have enough revenue and profit to support a manager, a salesperson, and a few technicians. Not that we won't do that, because we will if it's the right situation. But for the bigger companies out there, like take TruTech for example, or Critter Control, it's much cheaper for them just to go in there and spend their marketing on it, and they just
Yeah.
open it up
Just
than
start
to buy
fresh.
everything. Yeah,
Yeah, start.
exactly. So
And I
because it
think
is
that's
one
the
time.
challenge. Yeah, and I think that's
Yeah.
the challenge because we have a graying population among a lot of our. I mean, I'm back in the 80s. Okay, so we have a graying population of people that have established companies and done rather well,
Yeah.
but their body is wearing out.
Yep.
This is hard on your body. I mean, hello everyone. You got to take care of your body out there. Okay, so you're not 20 anymore. And some of them are beginning to realize that their body literally can't handle this anymore, because they're starting to get injuries that are really starting to impact their work. And so the challenge is they can't find those workers to do the work for them. You figured out a way to do that, and so we've got to do something to get this, because they have so much equity in their businesses and there's nothing to sell because they're
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, a customer list. If you have a bunch of good reviews, there's something to say for that. So we know that there's going to be referrals from that. There is ways to get some revenue from warranty renewals, but obviously that's not huge. But that there is something to say for that. And then their online footprint. If they're, like, for instance, if they are not spending any money on marketing and advertising, but the phone is ringing off the hook, what is causing that phone to ring? If that's something that will continue, if that's something that's not easily achieved, which in a lot of cases it's not, that's certainly worth something as well, that phone number. So, and all the intellectual property behind that company. So, we believe that that is worth something. And if they are 100% dependent on a marketing company or a lead generation company or Google ads, it's not going to be a good fit for us, because we can do that ourselves.
Sure.
But taking over a business that is spending $0 a year on advertising, well, that's very attractive, because they've obviously put in a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to build that out, or paid somebody else to, and that's definitely worth something.
Yeah. So let's transition over in terms of how you perform your wildlife control, if we could. And that is,
Yep.
we interviewed one company called Skedaddle. That's I
Yep.
believe it's out of Wisconsin. Their model is basically try to do as minimal killing as possible. Then you have other companies that are maybe on the other side, which is basically, remove the offending animal, dispatch that offending animal, secure the location. Then there's some people that are sort of in between at various gradations. Where does your business, where your business fit in all that?
Yeah, so we want to cut down as much as possible on our time and our fuel and our windshield time for our technicians in solving problems. So we have found that it's best, we focus on structural issues, not that we won't go trap beavers in a creek, because we do it all the time.
Right.
But our main focus is structural problems. We get the most revenue out of there. We get the most profit. We can sell that customer a a large project, insulation replacement, gutter guards, full exclusion, getting the animals out, etc. So we focus on structural, and we do try to avoid trapping, just because it requires a lot of multiple trips. So we use one-way doors religiously,
Wow.
and that's always going to be our first option. And in the event we need to get more aggressive, we will. We'll get up there and we'll get trap set and whatnot. But we want our exclusion to be so good that when those animals go out and they can't get back in, they're definitely staying out.
Right.
And also, if it's a rodent problem, squirrels, rats, mice, chipmunks, flying squirrels, there are so many of those critters, as you know. You can control those populations. You cannot eliminate those populations.
Right.
So trapping, although effective, it's a very slow process compared to doing full exclusion and installing one-way doors. We'll still install multiple one-way doors on one house, everywhere that we think is a entry point. And it's been very effective for us.
So you just want to avoid young rearing times, so that, because some of those females, when they're excluded from their young, they can be pretty aggressive trying to get back in.
Yeah.
So you have some windows there. Well, that's sort of like a skedaddle approach, where their goal is to sort of do one-way doors and maybe do some young reattachment with female raccoons, for example. They'll remove youngs with the young boxes and nursing boxes and that sort of thing. So because you want to have a technician there, sort of hardening the house, installing the one-way doors, then you can schedule when you go back to remove them, right? So it fits into your schedule, not, I got to get back there for an animal to remove from a trap. Does that sound about right?
It just cuts a lot of time down. And I think from the customer's perspective, it's a faster solution. They're calling us, I want this critter out of my house. Obviously, if they have a choice, they want it out as fast as possible.
Sure.
So we go out there and do that full exclusion. We know the animals are going to use those doors. We've been using them for 11 years now. They certainly work. And that's kind of always been our policy from the beginning. Certain situations, if it's a serious rodent infestation, you have to trap. You're going to have to.
Even the HSUS traps and kills occasionally. It does happen. So they even admit it. So I had Dr. Didion mention that to me once. He says, it's rare, but it's a far cry from the way I did business back in the day.
Yeah.
Right? Everything was trapped and killed. Although I did a little bit of one-way doors later in my work. But we were like, death works, man. Everything, because in Massachusetts you couldn't translocate. So if I walked off your property with an animal, it was dead. It was never coming back, right? So those days are. But anyways, so that's been a successful model for you. And so, do you have annual meetings for your organization where you're doing training sessions where everyone comes together like a critter control model, or are you doing webinars on a regular basis? How do you maintain consistency across all of your different shops so that everyone's sort of making sure you're maintaining the goals of Conserv, your organization?
Sure. So for our corporately owned branches, which is just 2 right now, our managers go out and do quality control weekly. They're not sitting behind a desk very much. They are out in the field, meeting with their technicians, helping them on jobs, looking behind the jobs and making sure exclusion work is done properly and everything looks professional and good. So that's how we maintain that quality on a corporately owned location. Partnerships and licensees, we started doing something last year which drastically cut down any customer complaints or callbacks. And it's something so simple. All it is a customer satisfaction form. So those licensees are penalized if they do not get that signed. Those partnerships are penalized if they do not get that signed. And they process their payments through our company. So we will hold those funds until that customer signs off saying that they're satisfied with the job well done. So they have an incentive which you can't do for employees.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty strong motivation. Yeah.
But you can. And I'm happy to say no Better Business Bureau complaints all of 2020 or this year.
That's amazing.
Or any bad reviews for any of our partnerships or licensees all of last year or this year. So there's something to say for that.
A lot of WCOs saw growth in 2020 with COVID. Was that the same for you? I mean, beyond acquisition growth, I'm referring to organic
Yeah,
growth. Did you find that to
yeah,
be the case as well for you?
yeah. We definitely had an increase in call volume
It,
specifically during those, I would say, like March, April, May, June, where we saw an increase. And we track our data religiously.
mhm.
So I can look at how many leads we got for each month of each year going all the way back, and for each location. And I could definitely see a huge increase last year.
Do you think that was because people were staying home? That's been the theory, that more people were staying home because they were telecommuting to work, or maybe their job disappeared, and therefore they couldn't ignore the scratching in the ceiling. Do you think that was the reason why?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you have a squirrel problem, you might not hear them very much at night.
Right.
So if you're the kind of guy or family that's up early, and you guys have kids and you guys are making a lot of noise in the morning, you're not going to really notice. And you guys are off to school and work, and then you're coming home, after soccer practice or whatever, dance class, and it's dark out, and you guys are again loud and having dinner and the TV's on, you might not notice those sounds. But if you're sitting at home all day and there's some quiet time, you're going to hear stuff. You're going to notice
Yeah.
stuff. So I think that definitely has something to do with it.
Where do you see the industry going in the next 10 years? I mean, think of it in terms of, methods of control, techniques, and maybe even services that are being provided. Where do you see us going in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot more smart technology, which a lot of people already are using more motion sensor cameras to monitor traps, or certain states that are allowing that now, which is
Right.
a huge time saver for those states that require the operator to check the trap.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a lot more of that, and I definitely see more one-way door use. Um,
That's true.
and I think that overall, it's going to just be more efficient and more profitable for us. That doesn't mean you need to reduce your prices just because you can use smart technology.
Yeah.
So a lot of companies are using that. Pest control companies are using it for rat traps already.
That is amazing. I've played with them a little bit. I just haven't found that cost of the ease of use quite yet. The ones I had were still a little fussy, and I was even working with my own Wi-Fi, in my house, and it's still a little fussy, and I just didn't find them as. But I'm assuming that over time, some of those bugs are going to get worked out, so it becomes a little bit more clean in that regard. Because it was just something that if you don't trust it, you
Yeah.
can't. It's really tough. Because
No.
that's why I kind of push people more toward the photograph version, the kind to take a picture, because
Yeah.
then you can see it rather than waiting for a signal. Like, I don't know. I just like to see stuff. I guess I'm a little biased. I'm
Yeah.
old school.
And there is a lot to say about a man or woman on site doing that inspection,
Yeah.
and looking at the trap and making sure there's nothing blocking the pan of the trap or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. And obviously, greeting the customer, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
So you still want to have that personal touch there. In Florida, for years, we always just had our customers check the traps. And Florida allows that. Florida's
Right.
not strict at all with a lot of stuff. Where you have other states like Alabama where we have to be there in person checking that trap still.
That's the way Massachusetts was before they changed
Yep.
that. When I was in business, it really shrinks your range
Yep.
when you're a one man. I was putting 3,000 miles a month on my vehicle. It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of driving. So I loved blind sets, two door traps. That was
Yep.
kind of my. If I could use two door traps, I was using two door traps without a doubt. I wanted to just catch it. If it moved through, I wanted it caught. So how are you dealing with injuries? How are you? Some people in the industry are starting to move towards getting bucket ladders, bucket
Uh-huh.
trucks, so they don't have to keep throwing the ladder up all the time where they're just using a bucket. And so some of them are in locations where the houses are spread out enough where they can get the vehicle around the back and they're just bucket laddering a whole lot of stuff to stop carrying that ladder around. Have you ever thought of anything like that, or have you heard of that being done?
I have. I've heard of a guy, I forget who it was. He said that he had got an old fire truck and used that.
Really?
Um,
Fire truck?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. We haven't, a lot of the yards that we're in, if there is enough space, there's such a big steep hill on either side of the
Oh,
house where it's
right.
just too steep probably to do that. We really try to find people who have a lot of experience getting on roofs for that kind of work. So we don't even look for wildlife experts. We're looking for roofers, handymen, guys that might have a little bit of an outdoor background that like to hunt and fish and know a little bit about wildlife, but have no fear of dealing with the steep roof. So if we have to, we'll get lifts where necessary. But no, I haven't thought about actually us purchasing one.
Okay.
Um, so I think that there could be an opportunity for that in certain locations.
You've talked a lot about the residential side. How about the business side in terms of those larger jobs? These massive bird exclusions, for example, maybe of a parking garage or maybe a hospital building and that sort of thing. Is that something you focus more in the residential area, or are you starting to move more toward the business side as well?
Yeah, we do probably 80% residential, 20% commercial, just the way that our marketing is and the way
Hmm.
our sales reps are. I would say that we probably could hire more sales reps and eventually focus on that. But I want to be very, very careful because I do want more recurring revenue. So our intention right now is to, we're still focusing on wildlife control, but we do want to offer more pest control services and more recurring revenue. So, although we could definitely hunt down a lot of these big bird jobs, that's great. But eventually, I'm going to want to retire. And when that day comes, I want to make sure my business is sellable as possible. And a $5 million or a $10 million pest control company with highly recurring revenue sells for a hell of a lot more than a $5 million one-time wildlife control business.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So, what advice would you have for people that are looking to grow their businesses? What types of advice that you would give them? They're like, "Hey, I'm a single operator. I'm in business for a couple of years. What should I be doing to make the jump that you made?"
the first thing is you need to document how you run your business as a technician. So how are you finding the entry points? What are you saying to the customer? What do your contracts look like? Have your contracts been reviewed by an attorney? And you need to document all the systems and processes in place because until then you can't hire anybody. But once you get all of that down, then you can hire someone and you can give them that blueprint and say, this is how you do your job exactly. And this is the way it should be done every single time. That way it can be scalable. So as soon as you can afford somebody, you should hire somebody, show them how to do everything, expect that they're going to screw up every single day because they will, and try to be as patient as possible. And really from there, once that person is slammed and you're kind of taking over that slack, just keep repeating that over and over again until you have enough profit to hire a manager. And for us, whenever we were first starting out, I probably could have hired a manager a lot sooner. I just didn't know it.
Hmm.
Um, and it goes back to what I said earlier is, focus on what you're good at. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? And try to hire the people for your weaknesses because you're going to be a lot better off and you're going to be a lot less stressed too. You're
Right.
going to enjoy your job. So I think that's a really important way to grow.
So your model was, it's, if I heard you correctly, and I just want to clarify something here. When I talk to business owners and they're struggling with time, and I recommend them for their first hire to be a secretary, someone in the office. If
Yeah.
there's sometimes they have a spouse doing it, but otherwise, if they don't, then I would say an office person can make free you up to do more of the field work that you're already comfortable
Sure.
with.
Sure.
Is that your advice, or do you suggest they hire a technician first if they have to make a choice? I mean, what would be your
Yeah.
preference?
I would look at my data. So one way to make that decision is identify how much time are you spending doing certain tasks.
Okay.
So if you're spending more time doing administrative stuff than you are being a technician, then yeah, you probably should hire an admin person first.
Okay.
One thing that we've done that's very different than most of our competitors is we outsource all of our calls. So we have an answering service that takes all of our calls. And not only is it way less expensive, but it's very consistent. And the company that we use, they're having to deal with managing that staff. We're not. We also don't have to have office space for that staff. We don't have to worry about if they're working from home or not.
Right.
They're doing that for us, and they have not skipped a beat. So this is our second year using them. We grew last year with them, and it worked out fabulous. So if you can get away with using that, that's great. Not everybody wants to do that. I understand, but it saves us a ton of money every year.
Sure.
Gives us capital to do other things.
Are you using like electronic contracts, or are you using paper, or both?
We use both. Just
Both, okay.
depends on the scenario. Ultimately, we save everything digitally. We don't save any paper.
Okay.
But we have both. Just depends on the situation. If it's a commercial client, we're using a digital contract 99% of the time.
Right.
If it's residential, then usually it's paper, and then we save a digital copy.
Okay. Is there anything? I think it's amazing. You've done some amazing things in this industry. I just have two more questions that I have, and then the next question I have is: when you need information, when you have a question you don't have an answer to, where do you go for your for your for your guidance?
Yeah, so I started a habit probably in 2018, a morning ritual that I have. So I'm an early riser. I get up at 4 a.m.
Oh,
pretty much 7 days a week. I was up at 4 a.m. this morning.
whew.
And that 4 a.m., the first 30 minutes is me getting down as much caffeine as possible.
Okay.
And then after that, I kind of go wherever my brain feels like I need to learn stuff. So I'm always learning every day. 7 days a week, I'm reading a book or I'm researching a topic that I need to know more about, whether it's finance or whatever it might be, banking, like anything and everything you could possibly think of. So that's what I do. And then, of course, over the years, I've met some people that have accomplished way more than me, just through relationships. And I try to, spend as much time around people that have achieved a lot more than me and, get advice from them. But, with today, with the podcasts that are out there, with the stuff that you put out and other people, there is just so much information at your fingertips.
Yeah. Okay.
And if you're not trying to get better regularly, well, you're probably not going to get much better. But if you're always trying to learn, you're going to start learning and you're going to start retaining that information and you're going to be able to apply that into your business.
Yeah, I love that incremental approach. I suggest people to, pick a journal article a week. I try to have at least read something and try to finish one journal article a week. And the journal article is usually 4 or 5 pages. Read 4 or 5 pages a week, whether it be a book or a journal article or something, just something that stretches you a little bit. And It sounds like you're doing that, except a little bit more on steroids, half an hour, maybe more each day. So doing that sort of thing. But yeah, it's really necessary. It's really important to keep pushing yourself because there's always one more thing to learn, and you never know when that little piece of information might make you money, because a lot of it is just simply you may never use it, but you don't know which part of the what is the phrase, 80% of what I spend on marketing, I don't know whether it's doing anything for me or something.
Right.
I just don't know which. I know marketing works, I just don't know which 20% actually is doing the job. Right. So the same
That's
thing
right.
with learning, right? You never know when you're going to come back and use that sort of thing. My last question was, and that is, was there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to cover in our time together? We've spent about 53 minutes together here, so we're looking at
Yeah.
if there's something
Yeah,
that I've
I'll say
missed.
this, and then we can wrap it up. I just think
Okay.
that a lot of the guys out there have more than enough opportunity to grow their business substantially. Um, Try not to be a perfectionist. A lot of times that prevents us from growing, and realize that the monsters in our industry, Terminex, Rollins, these big companies, Rentokil, they're not having they're not out complaining saying that there's not people. I don't know how many employees they have. They have thousands of employees all over the country,
Mm,
so I'm sure that they have challenges with people just like we all will.
right.
But you can certainly overcome that. You just got to get out there, and as you build up your company, you'll start to attract people. People will start coming to you. They'll start noticing. You'll hire somebody, and then you'll hire their friends. And there's just a lot of opportunity out there. You just got to go out there and break things and screw things up and tweak it accordingly, and eventually you'll get it right.
Yeah, I think that sort of positive vision is something we really need. And I'm really glad you shared that with us to really encourage people to, achieve the business goals that you have. So if you want to stay small, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're looking to grow, you're going to have to make some changes for that growth and do it
Yep.
and learn from it. So I really appreciate that. Well, thank you very much, Kyle. We really appreciate your coming on to the Pest Geek podcast, living the wildlife as part of with us today. We really appreciate you coming along. So let me sort of summarize this up here. Our guest today, if you haven't heard it, is Kyle Waltz, owner and CEO of Conserv. That's Conserv, no E on the end of that, LLC, that's based out of Birmingham, Alabama. There are multiple companies underneath this umbrella. It's not a franchise, but some of them are corporate owned, some of them are partnerships and this sort of thing. But there's sort of an umbrella, and you can find more about his company at Conserv. Again, that's no E on the end of that. ConservWildlifeServices.com. That's ConservWildlifeServices.com. And if you are a wildlife control operator and you're maybe getting tired of the daily grind and you're looking to probably sell your company or at least explore that opportunity, then you can certainly reach out to Kyle at his email is conserv, again, no E on the end of that, CONSERV at growth at conservmail.com. Growth at conservmail.com if you're looking to explore. And that email address, that information is also available on his website, which is conservwildlifeservices.com. Well, Kyle, really glad to have you on board here. So really glad to have you. And so that's going to be wrapping it up here for our broad podcast here today, or a vodcast if you're watching it on video. Hey, take a few moments, subscribe to our channel. Make sure you drop me a line if there's something you like about the show, something you didn't like about the show. Yeah, we'll even take hate mail too. If you have suggestions for future shows, or if you want to be on a show, perhaps you have a product or a service or something you want to talk about, definitely reach out to me. And how do you get a hold of me? It's Wildlife Control Consultant at gmail.com. That's Wildlife Control Consultant at gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you. And by the way, this is Living the Wildlife. Why? Because we want you to live the wildlife, not be the wildlife. Take care, everyone.